Imperfect Parent, where we really believe there is no perfect parent. And today we have a great conversation with Chris Stockhaus and his wife, Shauna. And they're talking about how to talk to your kids about sex and when.
This is a great conversation because personally, because I have a almost 10-year-old, and I feel like I'm right there. So I can't wait to ask him about that. But it's gonna be a good conversation. Yeah.
Hey guys, so here we are with Chris and Shauna. Thank you guys for being here. And we are talking about how do you talk to your kids about sex? Like that's just you sit down at the table and you're like, okay kids, so today.
We got the best topic of everyone.
Chris, you're really excited about
this
topic.
Or the worst topic. We drew the short straw.
Yeah.
And I'm personally really excited about this because I have a 10-year-old he's about to be 10. And I kind of feel like it's time, and I'm really anxious to hear if you guys how you approach this.
Very thankful I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, so we're ways away from that.
Yeah. So we have a 13-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Okay.
And so we have opened the door to conversation about sex with both of them. And we started earlier than 10 years old on this conversation with both of our boys. I think Isaiah, who's our 13-year-old, we started the conversation. He was probably 8, 9.
I was gonna say 6 or 7.
You think it was that early?
Started.
Yeah.
Started. Conversation.
Yeah, you're not going not expert course.
Yeah, there's levels to this.
Sure.
How
did you know? Was it just something you decided early? Like, hey, we're just going to start early, or were you watching for certain signs that they were ready? Like, how did you know 6 or 7 was the right time?
So we listened to a sermon where the pastor kind of hit on this subject, and he was like, begin the conversation early as you can, like 5, 6, like the very basics of things where there is an open door to a conversation that's going to go through adolescence, through their teenage years, and I think if we're going to communicate one thing in this video, it's that this isn't a talk. That you check it off the list. I had the sex talk with my kid.
Done. Whew.
Thank God I'm never going to deal with that again.
Yeah.
This is our philosophy is we want to be able to have a conversation with our kids that's ongoing about. We want them to be able to come to us at any time and feel comfortable to say I have a question or I'm struggling with something. Later in life, we want them to be able to do that, and that starts when they're younger. Is building that comfort level with them.
So did you start at the same age with each of your boys?
No, I think it was different for both. I remember that sermon that we listened to, instantly feeling behind.
Oh wow.
Oh no, we have a 6-year-old. So I ordered the books that they referenced, and that's been a great guide for us. And I think they were different ages because they're very different.
Yeah.
And we knew and trusted that our older one could handle it at a younger age, and then eventually it happened for our second child, but he was a little bit older than our first.
And probably the only way you knew that was that time in that relationship. You're able to gauge kind of, okay, he's ready, he's not at that age to jump into that conversation. Did you guys agree, just out of curiosity, on after that sermon, or was there some disagreement on no, I don't think he's ready, I think he's ready, or were you pretty much in lockstep on that?
We weren't sure. Neither of us was sure after hearing it. We bought the book. So there's this, we'll send the information, but there's a set of 4 books that we recommend that were recommended to us.
Okay.
And it's a series of 4, and one you read at 6 years old-ish. The next one they're supposed to read at 8 or 9. The next one
it's like a curriculum.
11. It's a curriculum.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And they're all age appropriate for that age bracket. And so the 6-year-old one is super basic. They're all Christian, and so it's walking through God's design for why He created the body and what the body is, and it's just real simple. And then it gets more direct around sex the older they get, and so we didn't know after listening to that sermon if are we ready for this or are boys ready for this until we bought the books and read them ourselves, and then we're like, oh yeah, they're both totally ready for the first and probably even the second book.
And I don't think you need to use the book exactly. I mean, you can make it your own. I think that's what we did, and we tailored it to each boy.
That's cool. And did you both sit down?
That's a good question.
I think you did it.
The more serious book, the older ones, the third book with our first child, I had him read it, and then it was just me and him sitting down and talking about it, because it's getting into all the real topics
Real
around
stuff,
how sex works and everything like that. And so, but we had a great conversation. Like he had a whole bunch of questions after reading it, and so it just opened up the door to a real conversation with questions and
it's
answers.
Like they were in a book club.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I thought that we'd have him do it with our second son, and I did.
Yeah, you
Because
did.
that's how it worked this time. I mean,
Okay.
it's just, yeah.
So there is no right, like you literally had to be so in tune to know, no, this is one for me to take.
Yeah.
And it's not going to work the same way that it
Yeah,
worked for
and
me
it
first.
wasn't planned, but
I
he
think the
knew.
moment just arose
Yeah.
Okay.
for her to just go there with
Okay.
him.
Okay.
He
okay.
knew the books existed, and he had been asking for a while, like,
How
when is
funny.
it my turn?
Oh,
So
wow.
that curiosity, which actually is a huge thing that we always want to make them feel comfortable, like, it is so normal to be
Yeah.
curious,
Yes.
so that they feel no shame coming into
Yeah,
this
yeah.
conversation.
That's super important.
So we both grew up in households great Christian households.
Mm-hmm.
We both had wonderful parents, but this wasn't. You don't really talk about this, right? There may have been the one conversation that happened, and then it's like off limits, and no one says it's off limits, but just because it's never talked about, you
And
just
it's
pick
awkward.
up. It's awkward, and what it does is it starts to unintentionally. We build up this shame towards this topic.
Yeah.
Where this is a topic that remains in the hidden part of our heart. It remains in the hidden part of our life, and that I believe that's really damaging. I believe that there's consequences to that are negative.
Yeah.
Not necessarily how someone will act out sexually as they get older. Maybe they won't. Maybe they will out of that shame of it being a secret, hidden thing in life. But like. Because we grew up in a household where it wasn't really talked about, when we got married, we didn't know how to talk about it ourselves. Like we weren't equipped with the tools, and so it affected our marriage. And so this is, when you think about your child, it's like you're thinking about the long term with them. It's not just about, I want to talk about it with them before their friend does.
Yeah.
It is that,
Yeah.
but it's also like this, I want to set them up to have just a healthy viewpoint on sexuality in general for the rest of their life. It's going to affect their marriage. It's going to affect multiple things in their life.
That's interesting. At Cornerstone, we would call that the imagined end, and this is not a topic we never normally include in that like teaching.
Right.
But it's this idea that like what I do
about.
now has a direct correlation with the adult my child becomes.
Yeah.
And the amount of impact that I have on my child is so much more when they're younger
Yes.
than as they start getting older. So I think that's actually a really great point to think about starting these conversations much younger,
Yes.
when your child is totally open to whatever
yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
say. Where if you
Yeah.
started at like 11, 12 years old, like they totally don't want to listen to what you have
Yeah.
to say.
The other really important reason to start when they're young, I think we started around 5 or 6, somewhere in there, is that it didn't go smooth and it wasn't perfect and it maybe was awkward and they don't remember because they were so young. So like I got away with
It was.
That's good.
You know,
That's
whereas
really
at
good,
11, they're gonna be like, "You're so awkward."
What is going
Yeah.
on? Stop
Yeah.
right
You're
now.
being weird,
So
Mom.
we got to
Whereas at
practice.
5 or 6, they're not feeling that.
Yeah,
So
They
are
don't
they
have
not weird about it now?
not at all.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
really impressive.
Yeah.
Are there questions that they could bring? You've built this kind of comfort with asking questions and coming back and curiosity. Is there a question that they could come back and ask, and you'd be like, you know what, we're not gonna go there yet? Or has that happened in the past where at that developmental stage
Yeah.
they weren't quite ready? Or I mean, I've also often heard like if they ask, answer the question.
Yeah.
Is there a
I can handle
line?
that.
Yeah. Yes. One of our boys asked about what it means to be gay
Okay.
at a moment where he was pretty young, and so we weren't ready to get into all the dynamics of that yet.
Sure.
And so I think we gave a simple answer, but then we said, hey, this is something that we'll talk about more as you get older. Our 13-year-old right now, I don't think, because he's 13, I don't think there's a question that he would ask that we would just answer.
okay.
Like, he's ready for, if he is going to ask it,
He's able to handle
Then
it maturely
we'll
enough.
answer it. He's old enough. Now, at like 6 or 7,
Sure.
there's things where you're going to put off, and
Yeah.
you're going to say, you know what, we'll if they heard it from their friend and they're curious about something, some of it, yeah, like if you could answer it, or you may say, no, when you're older, we'll get to that.
And we've discovered this to be true across most of our conversations in this series, but the idea that it is so contingent on where that kid's at.
Yeah.
And if you're out of tune with that, or if you're not in tune with what my child needs right now, you're going to miss a lot of those signs and perhaps risk something too early, too late, or whatever might.
I mean, the worst thing you could do is when they do ask you a question in this realm of topic is for you to react with like, how dare you, or surprise, or disgust, or anything like that, because those are critical moments, and the first 5 seconds of your reaction has big consequence for the rest of your relationship with this child in terms of their safety they feel, because they're going to talk about it with someone, and the hope is it would be with you as their parent, but if you accidentally shut that door by responding them immediately with disgust, or how we don't ask that question, or like that like they learn immediately, okay, my mom and dad aren't safe, I'm going to go to a different source to get my information on this.
And if you've done that already, it's okay. Go back, circle back, and go start the conversation again and say, I want to apologize. I don't feel like I handled that well. Remember when we talked a year ago about that topic? I want to talk about it again. Do that as many times as you need to.
Create a new pattern, because it's not permanent, right? You can recreate a new pattern.
It can feel that way.
If you didn't handle it right, it's not a forever mistake.
Well,
but you do have work to do to kind of correct it.
And if kids think that, like, oh, I shouldn't talk about that, my mom and dad clearly, like, that's not okay, then they're going to feel like you guys are at this, like, perfect pedestal. Of like, well, they wouldn't do anything wrong, so whenever I do something wrong, I'm not going to go to them. And you don't want to create that either.
I want them to know with confidence we are their primary sex educators. Not Johnny on the playground, and not public school. You know, trying. I mean, our 7th graders in that class right now, like a sex ed class, and that's fine. We're having great conversation as a result of it. But that's not where he's getting all his information. He's heard almost all of it already, but he did say, you know, what are STDs exactly? They watched a video of a transgender child and had a discussion about that. So he's coming home and initiating all these conversations with me, and now we're talking about everything he's talking about at school.
And you're so thankful you started that when you did.
If you try to pull that card right now,
it'd be more
without
difficult.
that
a little late.
Relationship,
But again, it's okay. I just probably wouldn't do it as well. Whereas we've had at least 20 conversations over the years. So I feel there's a lot of things as a parent that I feel like, dang it, you know, didn't nail that one. And I feel really good about how we set the tone at an early age, and we've just been building.
So has there been any like other parents that have come to you guys and like questioned how you guys are approaching this? And like I know parents talk about like, oh, when should we start talking about it? Like, has anybody ever asked you guys or come to you with
years ago questions? When we got the books, everyone that I was in communication with in my life at that time knows about these books, because I couldn't stop telling everyone about this great resource, and not that it was the best book, but it got us going. And I think it was so important for any parent to do that, and so I was kind of spreading the word at that point.
We also had conversations in 7th grade. You know, our son goes to public school. You have the option to let your child participate in the sex ed class or remove them, and they can literally walk out, and they have a separate place where those kids go while the rest of the kids go through the curriculum. And so we have to decide as parents, what are we going to do? And a lot of Christian parents remove their kids from that, which is fine. That's not wrong. We decided, because we'd had so many conversations with him about this topic, that he was somewhat prepared. And we wanted him to hear that side of things, or that take on things, and then bring it to us and us have a conversation at home, then try to set up a situation where we're avoiding it. And so it's not wrong to remove them at all. And we have friends who said, you know what, my kid's not going to go through that, and that's totally fine. And so there's disagreement on that, like how do you handle that situation? And I don't know if we're right or wrong. That's just what we felt was best for our one son. And then our second son, we may say, no, you're not going through that, because they're a different kid. And you just don't know. So
well, and we talk a lot in kids ministry about the wider circle and that group of people around you as parents to help support you as you go through all the stages of parenting. And I think that is what is so valuable about having other Christian parents that you can talk to, because like you sharing that resource, I'm like, oh yeah, I had a good solid Christian mom friend that I trusted tell me something like, this is a great resource, I would immediately go and get that resource to help with that. So I think that's so cool.
And the fact that it's a series is there's a level of accountability in that we have to do that again and again and again.
So and it's not just a one conversation done.
And the boys know there's multiple books.
So there's more that's ahead in terms of learning about all this and how it works.
Yeah. And we talked to them about how we were going to have this conversation today. And I said, you guys remember, how that went years ago? And they both did not.
Okay.
I said, our very first conversation, do you remember that? And they said no. And then our older son said, I think I'm ready for the next book. So even as of yesterday, they're ready. They're so curious. And I love that they feel safe in sharing that curiosity with us.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, this has been a fascinating conversation, and we could probably talk for a long time. But tell us about them. I think, did you bring some of them?
Yeah, we brought.
Tell us about them a little bit, and then just I think the last thing to close with is, if there's a parent out there who's journeying this journey and they feel like maybe they've got it wrong, they haven't started as early as you did or as intentionally as you did, maybe some encouragement for them on where they're at. And but tell us about these.
Yeah, so it's God's Design for Sex. There's 4. We only brought 3, so we brought book 2, 3, and 4. And so we'll have the links and information where you could buy them on Amazon.
And again, it's a book that the kid reads, or you
read
with
the kid reads it.
Okay.
The first one, which we don't have, you read with the kid.
Okay.
Because it's for like 3 to 5 years old.
Okay, so you're literally like
3 to 5
reading with
can't even read yet.
Yeah.
And then the last 3.
So I really do need to start this now.
Yeah, you hear it off the hook. Yeah.
The second one's for ages 5 to 8.
Okay.
The third one's for ages 8 to 11.
Okay.
And then the fourth one's for ages 11 to 14.
Okay.
And they're good. I mean, they're good. They're not perfect, but they're really good, and they kickstart a conversation and relationship around this topic. So, which is the most important thing.
So again, if someone's journeying this journey and they're a little discouraged, they started late, or they're not prepared for the conversation or the question their kid asked them yesterday, what would you tell them?
Well, it's never too late. You may say, "Hey, I wish I started earlier." After you hear this, but that's okay. Like we said earlier, you can go back and you can always start a new pattern now. And I think being vulnerable and humble yourself to say, hey, I may not, I should have brought this up earlier, or I didn't handle it right earlier. And if you're kind of vulnerable and transparent and real with them, I think they'll be open to that, receiving that, and creating a new pattern with you where there is an open dialogue going forward that's healthy. I don't think it's ever too late to change that pattern.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, because our goal is to have a connection with our boys, and nothing connects you stronger than if you're vulnerable and transparent. So even you have to be more humble to do it and say I messed up, rather than just initiating a conversation to say I want another chance. I always finish these conversations with the boys and feel closer to them. So that's what feels like a successful parenting moment.
Yeah, that's real. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
that our vulnerability actually draws us closer to our kids.
Well, and I think the lessons become more powerful as they get older. We can tell them more about our mistakes.
Yeah.
Right, and that's where I think the most powerful. That's where it really sinks home the most, in a way where our kids can. We're not just like, well, the Bible says, so that's what you have to do because the Bible says, and that's the end of the story. It's like, no, actually, the Bible does say it, and like I have experience to show, like, the Bible is recommending the healthy way, and here's why. Here's how I got hurt, or here's how. Now, when it's age appropriate to share some of the stories, but oh my gosh, those are so powerful, and your kids will feel so much more safe to admit their stuff later on when you've already admitted yours.
Yeah, you're just setting the tone for your relationship with them.
Yeah, for sure. So.
Well, thanks so much for watching another episode of The Imperfect Parent, where we don't believe there are any perfect parents, and I appreciate you listening to this conversation and joining in. Take care. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Gosh, talk about a heavy, not heavy, I don't know, just... Daunting. Yeah. I feel not prepared, not adequate, and I'm totally missed the boat. I needed to start like 4 years ago.
Well, and I thought I had quite a few years to wait on this.
Right now.
But I'm kind of thinking, after hearing what they had to say, that maybe this is something we need to talk about sooner.
And so, as always, we want to give you a couple practical resources, and we'll put some links to additional resources. But we got a chance to kind of page through these.
Yeah.
And these books, gosh, as much as I just, again, you page through them and you go, Wait, really?
I don't want
My
to talk about that. I don't want my kids asking questions about that.
But I loved what they said about this idea that if starting early, building this expectation that this is something we talk about in our family.
Yeah, you're setting that foundation of a safe place for your kid to come.
Yeah.
And like I was even just thumbing through this first one or second one, it's for ages 5 to 8. And I was like, oh man, like I know kids 5 to 8. I used to teach kids that age. Like they would totally laugh at that. They would make fun of that. But if I approach it with my children in a way that this is something that we just talk about.
Yes.
And it's not just said to be funny, but it's how God made us. It's how we're designed. And this is, something that's safe to talk to us about.
And I also love the kind of encouragement they left where, like me, like we really haven't dove in at this level with Jackson. But the fact that there's grace there, like you just circle back around and start now.
Honest.
Like that was good for me to hear, to go, okay, we can have this conversation. So I know what I'm talking to my wife about tonight, and we're going to be ordering on Amazon. But thanks for watching Imperfect Parent,
thanks, guys.
Our heart is that you don't feel the pressure that society puts on you to have all the answers, but rather just have the conversation and be intentional about that. So like we always encourage you to do, click subscribe, and we can't wait for our next video to come out. But cool.
Thanks.